Hey guys, today I'm going to be doing a non-WCA puzzle tier list. So the first puzzle is the Christmas tree cube. Looks pretty cool. It's a Christmas tree. The only problem is it's too easy. You're never more than a couple moves away from it being solved. I'm going to bring it to B tier. Another puzzle that suffers from the same problem is the 3x3x1 floppy cube. You're really never more than a few moves away from it being solved, so it's not as enjoyable a solve because it's just way too short, which means this goes in the same B tier. So now, since we already did one cuboid, let's just do the other cuboids. The 2x2x3 is definitely my favorite out of these. It's not too easy like the floppy cube, and it also just turns objectively the best out of all of these. I'm also taking turning quality into account. You do need to know some algorithms. There is a method for it, but it's just enjoyable to solve. It takes a few seconds only. This is the first S tier puzzle of this video. This 3x3x2 is about the same difficulty level, but the turning is worse because it's from a different brand, and there's this piece that comes off. It's just not as enjoyable to solve in my opinion. I'm gonna put it up in the B tier. Next is the 3x3x4, which is definitely more of a challenge. It kind of combines the skills you need to know from these two, but it's just not as enjoyable a solve, mainly because of the hardware of this cube. It locks up quite a bit, and sometimes when you're trying to turn and the layers are misaligned, it sometimes just pops. I was literally solving this like 5 minutes ago, and like half of this entire side just came off, so I never really picked this up, which is why it's going to be the first D tier puzzle. So those were all the cuboids. Our next category is the mirror block. So this is just like a normal 2x2 and 3x3. Just instead of lining up colors, you line up the shape and size of the pieces. I do prefer this one though, because you line up the pieces relative to each other instead of relative to a center, which means I'm gonna put 2x2 mirror blocks in S tier and 3x3 in A tier. The Armadillo Cube has surprisingly nice turning. I don't remember the last time I've actually like solved this just for fun, but it does look really cool with all the colors. Still, I'm gonna move it up to the A tier. The Barrel Cube is one of the most simple 3x3 shape mods, but it's just kind of a 3x3, and it just doesn't look as cool as some of the other mods. So this goes in C tier. And speaking of cool looking mods, this is the Axis Cube. Probably my favorite, or one of my favorite 3x3 shape mods, just because of how it looks when solved, and also how it looks when scrambled. Everything's just kind of spiking out, and you can barely tell that it's even supposed to be a Rubik's Cube. This goes in the S tier. Similarly cool looking is the Pandora Cube. This is the shape mod that's closest to a 3x3 probably, but you just kind of have this square inside a square inside a square pattern, which just looks cool. And this definitely goes up into the S tier. This Fisher Cube, on the other hand, I don't find myself solving as often. The turning isn't as good. I think it's better than the Barrel Cube, but in my opinion, it's not as good as some of the other mods. So this goes in B tier. The Windmill Cube is definitely a cool looking one. This is probably, again, one of my favorite 3x3 shape mods, especially when you make a checkerboard pattern. This probably goes in the S tier or maybe the A tier. I'm gonna put it in the S tier. The Void Cube is just a 3x3 with holes in it. It's made by Rubik's and it doesn't turn very well. The layers need to be exactly aligned for you to even begin to turn it. Also, it has this annoying parity that you can pretty much only solve by restarting the entire solve. So this definitely goes into D tier. Another 3x3 type cube by Rubik's is the Impossible Cube. And actually, I'm not putting this on the list because I've never solved it or even scrambled it. I'm actually making a video about this eventually, so if you want to check it out, then subscribe to the channel. This is the Cubix Cube. This is definitely one of the cooler concepts. You put a ball in one end and it comes out the other end. It's definitely the hardest 3x3 shape mod on this tier list, but also it is fun lining up the pieces and experimenting with what goes where and stuff like that. The challenge is kind of frustrating if it takes more than a few minutes though, so I am gonna put this at A tier and might move it up to S tier just because of the creativity, uniqueness of this idea. Next up are these three homemade shape mods. This is the Siamese Cube, and the catch with this is that you have to turn with certain layers and not with others. Kind of restricts what you're doing. These stickers are really faded because this is my first ever Rubik's Cube from like 8 years ago. The turning is surprisingly good for Rubik's brands, but I don't find myself solving this often. I'm gonna put it at C tier, not only because of the restricted moves, but also just because of how it looks. This is the Edges Only Cube with these really peeled stickers that I made out of an old Shangshao cube. The turning isn't good because these stickers like rub on the pieces, and it's just overall not that enjoyable to solve. I think it's dusty on the inside also. I'm gonna have to put it at D tier. This is the Fused Cube, which you can solve using R, U, and F moves only. The actual gluing job is not that good. These can probably come apart if I pull it hard enough. So not the best craftsmanship, but a more enjoyable solve than the Siamese Cube or the Edges Only Cube. So I'm gonna put it at A tier. So now onto the pyramid shaped puzzles. These are the Morphix puzzles. This one's a 2x2 shape mod, 3x3 shape mod, and 4x4 shape mod. Easily my least favorite out of these is the 4x4 Megamorphix because of a very annoying parity that I literally have to start the solve over if I get that case, which is not very fun. Otherwise, this puzzle does look very cool, and it makes an awesome checkerboard pattern, but I think just because of the parity problem alone, I might have to put it at D tier, even though I don't really want to. I'm gonna move it up to C tier. The 3x3 Master Morphix is probably my favorite, just because it's kind of a happy medium between the Morphix puzzles. This one goes up at A tier. And this is the 2x2 version of that puzzle. This, in my opinion, isn't as enjoyable of a solve as the 3x3 one, and it's basically a little more challenging than the 2x2. Just, I can't really speed solve this like I would a 2x2. I'm gonna put it in B tier. And this is the Professor's Pyraminx. This isn't a 5x5 shape mod like the other ones were shape mods of their respective cube puzzles. Maybe if I made this video a year ago, I would have put it at the lowest tier. But actually, I have kind of learned how to solve this. I did a live stream where I solved this. At least I think that was a year ago. Maybe it was 2 years ago now. This is the perfect medium between like doable and challenging, because I did kind of use my own method to solve this, which is satisfying. I'm not even sure if I would be able to remember how to solve it, but I do enjoy the solving process of this enough to move it up to A tier and maybe even S tier, but I'm gonna leave it at A tier for now. This is the Cubix Cube. It's basically just a cube, but with center orientation. I'm gonna put it at C tier. These other cube type puzzles, on the other hand, are kind of my favorite genre of non-WCA puzzles. These are ones you could solve in probably a few seconds, and maybe even solve intuitively. I just turn by their corners, and yeah, they're just fun to solve in my opinion. I'm gonna put all three of these in the S tier, especially the Ready Cube. This is one of my favorite non-WCA puzzles. We're almost done with all the puzzles in this tier list, but the next category is the Pyraminx type puzzles with like either lower or higher order. This one doesn't turn very well, it takes a long time to solve, and just isn't that enjoyable, especially with this turning quality. I think it's just too time consuming to find all the pieces and stuff. It's not even that big a challenge, because basically if you know how to solve a 5x5 and a Pyraminx, you could probably solve this. It just takes way too much time. I'm gonna put it in D tier. This, on the other hand, doesn't take that much time. I could probably solve it in under a minute, and it's just basically putting the corners in their places and solving it like that. And yeah, I just like the solving process of this one better, which is why I'm gonna put it in the A tier. Now for the gear puzzles, this one's super cool in like the way you turn it, but as far as the solving experience goes, there is this parity that I'm not too familiar with. So it would be in the D tier if we were going off solving experience alone, because I just don't enjoy really solving this puzzle that much. But the fact that it's like a gear thing that you can turn and pull apart just makes it cool. I'm gonna put it in the B tier. Now these two puzzles, the gear ball and the giant gear cube, are basically the exact same puzzle, and this is definitely my favorite gear puzzle, so I'm actually gonna put it up in the S tier. The face turning octahedron is kind of in a category of its own. I'm scared to scramble it because I do not remember the algorithms for this thing, which means I don't solve it very often. I'm gonna put it in the C tier. This is the puzzle ball. It's not really a traditional puzzle, but you just kind of move this thing around, turn the hemispheres, but only when these are exactly aligned. It's a challenging solve if you don't already know the algorithms, and the turning, well, you can't really turn it unless it's exactly aligned. I'm gonna put it in the D tier. The rainbow ball is one of the newest additions to the collection. You just kind of move this thing around, these little balls, and get them in the right spots. It's a fun solving experience, not too much of a challenge though, but it is satisfying to hear the things click into place, so I'm gonna put it in the A tier. And the final puzzle, is the snake. It's not really a twisty puzzle because it's the same thing every time. You just kind of have to know how to fold it into place. B tier. So that's my official non-WCA puzzle tier list. What are your thoughts? Would you change anything on this? Do you have any puzzles that I didn't put on there? Just any thoughts on this video, leave them down in the comments. Make sure to like this video and subscribe if you want to see more cubing content like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.